Story 1. I would expect them to introduce friction and confusion among allies, major trading partners, and domestically degrade and dismantle major institutions like in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Central Intelligence Agency, and National Institutes of Health so they cannot see what is going on, take a foreign policy stance regarding Ukraine that favors Russia, further exacerbate domestic issues to distract and turn people against each other, and assign more blame to groups other than Russia, such as Mexico and China. That way, Russia can move and act more freely without the United States knowing or even being able to do anything, and the United States will have lost its capacity to function for years or even decades at best. We are ripe for a massive increase in corruption because key groups with oversight capabilities are being eliminated. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is being degraded, so we will not even know, let alone measure, what is going on. The National Institutes of Health are being degraded, so we are losing our key health surveillance and research infrastructure to address chronic illnesses and new infectious diseases we know are coming our way. Elon Musk even took aim at major United States defense programs like the F-35, which is accumulating strong evidence of its effectiveness as shown by allied countries, so the military may well be degraded too, on top of other issues. Whether a Russian agent or simply corrupt and unhinged, the Trump administration is in the process of doing, and has done, more damage to us than our adversaries could do alone. Story 2. They would probably demand Ukraine give up the war and pay the United States in rare earth metals. Probably say our institutions are corrupt and begin dismantling them. They would probably suggest that our judicial branch is corrupt and that ultimate power lies with the president. They would probably fire federal workers and say the Federal Bureau of Investigation is corrupt. They would probably hint at how they stole the recent election. Story 3. I would expect them to sow domestic chaos and confusion by defunding and undermining our government without any clear plan, to sow international confusion and doubt by betraying and threatening the country's traditional allies while cozying up to longtime enemies, put the country's citizens at risk by damaging the economy, and ignore the law every step of the way, all the while insisting this is something America overwhelmingly voted for. But to be fair, I would also expect these things if that president were serving a domestic theocratic nationalist movement, or if that president was indebted to a would-be king who bought him the election. So who knows why this hypothetical president might be doing what he's doing? Story 4. Create a nebulous government agency that has ill-defined powers across all agencies and name it after something that suggests your country is a joke, like some frivolous internet meme. Story 5. We've arranged for a meeting in the White House with the president of Russia to discuss a peace deal about Ukraine, which they invaded. No, Ukraine's leadership is not invited to participate in this deal. Story 6. Do not pay attention to the Senate report that confirmed Russian collusion in 2016. Let us ignore that and the two independent reports showing the 2020 election was not stolen and harmed a bunch of police officers while crimes were committed based on lies. Oh, and do not forget I told you that I would let Vladimir Putin do whatever he wants and admitted to capitulating to him today. Story 7. Ask ChatGPT and it's almost as if we are living it. These could include 1. Weaken North Atlantic Treaty Organization, reducing United States commitments, pressuring allies to pay more or threatening withdrawal. End support for Ukraine, cutting military aid, pushing for a Russia-favorable peace deal. Lift sanctions on Russia, rolling back penalties imposed after Crimea's annexation or election interference. Undermine United States intelligence and law enforcement, discrediting agencies that investigated Russian influence. Alienate European allies, straining United States relationships with key North Atlantic Treaty Organization and European Union countries. Support Russian energy interests, opposing policies that weaken Russia's oil and gas dominance. Adopt Kremlin talking points, repeating narratives favorable to Putin on global affairs. Story 8. They would fashion their government after the Russians, placing billionaire oligarchs into positions of power to oversee things. They would cry fraud and abuse at anything they don't like and constantly lie about changes they are making while providing zero accountability. Story 9. Gen Z here. It all screams KGB, from the bride to the blitz of overreach of the brand she leads. The Hollywood-style Roger Stone January 6 drama to exploiting the demographics of baby boomers. The spamming of employees using proven email scamming manipulation. Hijack the capitalists at their weakest link, the money and greed. Story 10. Every single thing the orange orangutan has said since he met Vladimir Putin. He's been a Russian stooge the whole time, but he's too narcissistic to realize he's been played. Story 11. Basically, everything Elon is doing, and he is known to have contact with Putin, and to have sabotaged Ukrainian movements around Crimea by shutting off their Starlink access in that area. Elon Musk is a Russian asset. Story 12. Right on. All I can say is Trump is literally the Antichrist and has to be stopped. May God bless all who answer the call to vanquish this evil with the strength of heaven that they may do so. Make America great again, supporters. Either you've been fooled by this evil and are unwittingly following it, or you're evil yourself and just don't care. So, which is it? Story 13. I'll negotiate a peace deal between Russia and its enemies that largely benefits Russia and won't bother informing or inviting said enemies of Russia, but definitely an ally of mine. Also, I'll hire a man who has no interest in being involved in government, except to have charges against him dropped and investigations into his crimes stopped, and who is clearly also working for Russia. Remember when Elon Musk was criticizing Vladimir Putin? Then someone released Elon's emails with Jeffrey Epstein talking about flying from California to Florida to get judo lessons from Ghislaine Maxwell. A couple of days later, Elon was flying to Moscow, and when he came back, he was praising Russia and has been accommodating since, in regular communication with Putin since then. Story 14. Probably something like, "My heart goes out to you," followed by some kind of blatant gesture to completely and totally hide the fact that this person is indeed a Russian spy. Story 15. First off, they would start weakening the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Maybe they would cut funding, start arguments with allies, or even suggest the United States pull out entirely. Anything to make Europe more vulnerable. Then there would be strange foreign policy choices. Suddenly, the United States stops caring about Russian aggression, maybe even lifts sanctions or turns a blind eye to things like Crimea. Domestically, they would want to divide the country as much as possible. Stir up culture wars, fan the flames of political division, make sure Americans are too busy fighting each other to notice what is going on globally. And let us be real, they would probably push for policies that hurt United States energy production. Why let America be energy independent when Russia can rake in cash selling oil and gas? Oh, and cybersecurity? That would be an absolute mess. You would see intelligence agencies mysteriously defunded or ignored, Russian hacking operations going unchecked, and maybe some well-timed leaks to discredit political enemies. Of course, they would have to do all this while pretending to be a patriotic American. So expect a lot of over-the-top flag-waving, tough talk, and blaming China for everything. Story 16. What do spies do? Collect and destroy intelligence. Conduct counter-espionage. Steal sensitive information. Spy on the most secret departments, projects, personnel, and movements of armed forces. Curtail or weaken the power of the authorities, regulatory institutions, and law enforcement. Outright shut down or hinder key pillars of government, such as economic, welfare, health, licensing, and justice systems, that serve the general populace to sow long-term chaos and create irreparable damage to the welfare of the people. Reverse course on any trade agreements, information sharing, supports, and assistance that were enacted by previous parties in power, as this will aid enemy states and be destructive to long-term allies. Bring in other assets and recruit sympathizers within to help. Story 17. Change the names of major geographic features, create chaos with random declarations, threaten allies, wreck the stock market, break campaign promises. Story 18. Hire someone from a different country to run an unauthorized department, removing people who aren't supporters. Then, I would immediately criticize immigrants to create a common enemy, convincing everyone that it's them harming us, not me. I would also eliminate the Department of Education because the less we teach children about the past, the easier it is to repeat actions that have already been done. If you aren't allowed to or can't read books, you can't see that it all follows the same playbook. Story 19. If a foreign-backed operative managed to get elected, you would expect them to do everything possible to weaken the country from within. They would cast doubt on elections, even the ones they won, so that their supporters only trusted them, not the democratic process. And when their power was at risk, they would pressure officials to change results, push fake electors, and, if all else failed, incite their followers to physically interfere with the peaceful transfer of power. They would also have a long, murky history, shady real estate deals, deep connections to organized crime, and a habit of laundering money through questionable ventures. They might hoard classified documents in unsecured locations, refuse to return them, and even show them off to people who had no business seeing them. At the same time, they would systematically undermine the rule of law, pressuring the Justice Department to investigate enemies while shielding allies from consequences. They would install loyalists in key government positions, not for competence, but to protect themselves. And as the country unraveled under their watch, they would not try to fix it. They would just demand loyalty, pick fights with the media, and convince their followers that only they could save a nation they were actively destroying. Story 20. Isn't it obvious? Hire a South African billionaire to destroy everything from the inside. Hand Ukraine to Russia. Weaken North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Start unnecessary trade wars with our closest allies and, in general, turn the world against the United States and the dollar. Nobody can trust the United States if every 4 years we elect a criminal psychopath. Whether he is or isn't is debatable, but he is doing all this, and it doesn't end the way he thinks it does. Story 21. Hypothetically, one might expect a president with covert allegiances to shift foreign policy. They could prioritize better relations with Russia, potentially easing sanctions or downplaying North Atlantic Treaty Organization commitments. Rhetorical changes. They might make ambiguous or contradictory statements about national security, sometimes praising Russian leadership or policies. Institutional erosion. There could be an undermining of traditional checks and balances, with increased secrecy or manipulation of intelligence to suit their agenda. Domestic messaging. They may emphasize nationalist rhetoric that aligns with undermining established political norms, possibly questioning the legitimacy of prior institutions. This is purely speculative and does not reflect any real-world evidence. Story 22. It's funny how you call Trump a Russian secret agent, because some people in Russia call Putin an American secret agent. His action led to the highest inflation in Russia since 1999, isolation of the country, and killing tens or hundreds of thousands of capable men. One of Russia's regions was invaded, and that is only in the last 3 years. So, it's more like autocrats care more about themselves and their friends than for the country or people, and Trump is an autocrat. Story 23. Frankly, the military should have stepped in during 2016 when this stooge was first given significant power. I'm not sure why this farce is still being entertained. A third of the population was mentally hijacked, unable to process reality, while foreign influence compromised the highest levels of our government. The military should have stepped in on January 6, 2021, when a mob overran the Capitol in an open attempt to overturn an election. The military should have stepped in during 2024 when he ran on a campaign of purging military officers, Central Intelligence Agency and Federal Bureau of Investigation employees, not on the basis of competence or loyalty to the Constitution, but personal allegiance to him. The military should have stepped in when a foreign national nursing a grudge against the country, and in direct contact with Putin gained illegal access to the Treasury and other sensitive departments, and when a Putin stooge was appointed to run the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Director of National Intelligence, and other critical intelligence positions. If this Russian-backed clown is able to seize control of the government this easily, I have to wonder what have my tax dollars been funding. If national security means anything, then preventing a foreign-backed coup that weaponizes our own institutions against us should have been a day-one priority. There should have been contingency plans sitting on a shelf, ready to break open in case of emergency. I've spoken to Marines who insist to me that men like General Mattis would stand with the people. From where I'm sitting, I have to ask, where are they? Story 24. I would expect them to do a reasonable job except when Vladimir Putin uses nuclear bombs on Kyiv, then they would respond with only total sanctions. And when Russia declares Moldova and Ukraine to be Russian territory, I expect they would respond with troops on North Atlantic Treaty Organization borders. Finally, at the end of their term, this person would seek to normalize relations with Russia, ceasing all sanctions and retreating North Atlantic Treaty Organization forces for some sort of gesture like recognizing Israel as the rightful sovereign over Gaza and the West Bank or something similar. thus giving Russia everything they want while leaving the possibility that the president was just incompetent. Story 25. I would expect them to remove sanctions from Russia and also release prisoners by trading them, but make bad deals like an arms smuggler for a basketball player.